Hello, BookTube, and Merry Christmas. I have a Christmas Day mail haul for you here. I seem completely right to open packages, to open presents on Christmas Day. So I've got a bunch of boxes and one thing that isn't a box, one envelope, and then we'll do the boxes. We'll hope for something that produces a squeal every bit as pronounced as the squeal of a kid on Christmas morning. I still have that kind of feeling, even though I get books in the mail all the time. So what is this first one? Oh, what is this? Oh my. Oh goodness. Okay, so this comes from, this is actually a bullseye. Great. This is by Darrell Duthie, and it is called Malcolm McPhail's Great War. It's the first book in this series. You've seen the next two. The publicist for this author sent me the second book out of the blue, just contacted me, wanting to know if they could send me a book. The answer to that for you indie authors out there is always yes. There are three things that may or may not happen. You can send me a book. I invite you to do it. I urge you to do it. I know as well as anybody the uphill road that indie authors have to face in getting the word out about their book. Thing number one that I can all but guarantee is that I will open your book on camera and show it to lots and lots of dedicated readers, some of whom may be more interested in your book than I end up being. Thing number two, which I can completely guarantee, not mostly guarantee, is that I will read your book. I read everything I'm sent eventually. And then there's thing number three, which is whether or not I will review your book. That's a much lower percentage, but it could happen. And this is fantastic. This is the first book in the series, which is great. I didn't have it, so I should say as a mark of praise for the series that you don't need to have any of the earlier books. Every book is completely readable on its own, and this publisher did something that not a lot of them do. W.W. Norton or Penguin or whatnot don't usually do this, and that is they sent a treat for Frida. They sent a treat for you, baby bean. Yes, there you go. So she is now going to demolish her treat. So we'll both eat this right up. Okay, well that's the first one. That's great. This comes from, I believe, sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather here. Yes, this actually comes from the author's publisher, S. Dorn Editions. So don't let this be an encouragement to the rest of you. My rule, my admonition, my strong advice when it comes to giving Steve presents is still true. Don't send me a book. This is coming from a publisher. And somebody at the publisher must have realized that they hadn't sent me the first one, the first book in this series. It'd be interesting to read, although I've loved the other two. So, okay, then we move on to the boxes. That's great. So if these are all boxes, I'm hoping they'll all be finished copies. Probably all for January 7th, since that seems to be the big go-to date. Let's see what this first one is. January 6th. Close enough. Close enough. This is from Oxford University Press. I think we might have seen this already. This is Democracy and Equality, the Enduring Constitutional Vision of the Warren Court. Right up Steve's alley, in other words, exactly up my alley. The Warren Court, led by Chief Justice Earl Warren from 1953 to 1969, brought about some of the proudest achievements of any Supreme Court in United States history. The Warren Court declared racial segregation and laws forbidding interracial marriage to be unconstitutional. It expanded the right of citizens to criticize public officials. It held school prayer unconstitutional. It ruled that people accused of a crime must be given a lawyer even if they can't afford one. Despite these monumental accomplishments, the Warren Court is routinely attacked by conservative critics today, claiming that they abused their authority and that they were too, quote, activist. But none of the conservative critics would want to do away with all the benefits that the Warren Court or any other activist, so-called activist court provided. None of them would want to do away with a lot of those things, although quite a few of them they would. Most of the current crazed, spittle-flecking, eyes up in the back of the head paleo-conservatives do want prayer in schools, Christian prayer in schools. They want, and it's not that they want the Muslim students or Hindu students to sit quietly while the Christians pray. It's that they want the Muslim students or the Hindu students to be forcibly converted. There's a strain running through today's conservative Republican Party that is unrecognizable to a normal Republican. So probably that strain would probably want to do away with most of the guarantees of the Warren Court. In this book, these two are legal scholars. The authors are two legal scholars. And in this book, they examine 12 of the court's most important controversial decisions, including Brown v. Board of Education and the decisions about school prayer and about political dissent in newspapers. Exploring the historical and legal context of each case and the court's reasoning and how the justices fulfilled the court's most important responsibilities. Contrary to conservative claims that the Warren Court's decisions are not lawful, Stone and Strauss demonstrate that their decisions were in fact rooted in American tradition of equality, democracy, and respect for dignity of individuals. Okay, and apparently the 2020 is the 50th anniversary of the end of the Warren Court. Oh no, it'd be 2019 that is. It's 1969 to 2019. Even I can do that. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter to me. As I mentioned on this channel before, I'm a Supreme Court, a U.S. Supreme Court junkie. I read their decisions. I read their obiter dicta. I read about them a lot. So this is a no-brainer anyway, no matter what kind of anniversary we have going. So that's great. So that's January hardcover. I think these are all going to be January hardcovers. Let's see what the next one is. Yes, indeed. The next one is also a January hardcover, also from Oxford. I wonder if these are all going to be from Oxford. I wouldn't complain about that at all. This is January 3rd, so these are all over the map. This is Kathy Pice, and this is Information Hunters, when librarians, soldiers, and spies banded together in World War II Europe. During World War II, an unlikely band of American librarians, activists, and scholars went abroad to aid the Allies. Their goal, to seize Nazi works from bookstores and schools, unearthing collections hidden in cellars and caves, and grapple with the consequences of mass looting and the dislocation of countless books. In this new book, cultural historian Kathy Pice provides a fascinating account of how book and document collecting became part of the new apparatus of intelligence and national security, military planning, and post-war reconstruction. She uncovers these worlds of collecting in the spy-ridden cities of Stockholm and Lisbon, in liberated Paris, the rubble of Berlin, and in German caves and mine shafts. Okay, all right, fascinating. I am again on board. These are filling out the January ranks with books. Okay, so now we'll move on to this next one. If I get 4 works of history in a row, I'm going to believe in Santa again. So we'll see. There's got to be a overreaching derivative work of contemporary fiction about upper middle class Connecticut divorce. There's got to be something like that in here. Okay, this next one, the pull tab did not work, so I have to rip apart the box like a gorilla in an American Tourister commercial. I have to just tear the box apart. One of the many instances where I'm grateful that I have no working sense of touch. So what is this next one? Okay, this is from Princeton University Press. This comes out December 3rd. This is a December book. Oh my. Okay. Well, I can put this. I have sort of a small list of books that I am considering reviewing in the first week of the new year books that came out in December when no one was paying attention. I might have to add this to the list. So this is by Christian Smith, Bridget Ritz, and Michael Rotolo, and it's called Religious Parenting: Transmitting Faith and Values in Contemporary America. And its publication date, I don't know how strict they're observing it, but it was early December, so it should be, well, it's Princeton University Press, and it's on a non-populous subject, so it probably won't be in your bookstores, but you would be able to order it from them. How do American parents pass their religion on to their children? We know that parents are the most important influence on their children's religious lives, yet parents have been virtually ignored in previous works on religious socialization. Religious Parenting is the first scholarly book to examine intergenerational religious transmission from the perspective of parents. The authors conducted hundreds of in-depth interviews spanning religious traditions, social classes, and family types all around the country. The book features the voices of evangelical, Catholic, Mormon, mainline, and Black Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist parents, and shows that, despite massive diversity, American parents share a nearly identical approach to socializing their children religiously. Challenging long-standing sociological and anthropological assumptions about culture, the authors demonstrate that parents of highly dissimilar backgrounds share the same, quote, cultural models when passing on religion to their children. Okay, all right. Well, it's a book I'm going to disagree with, but it would be a pretty boring world if I didn't disagree with some books, obviously. I'm obviously going to disagree with this, with the very idea of instilling religion in children. Religion is an adult choice. If you make your children worship, if you make them repeat dogma and incantations over and over again when they can barely form coherent thought, then you are indoctrinating them. You aren't passing something on intergenerationally. You're brainwashing them into a kind of rigid thinking that's not just inclusive but also exclusive, that they are going to go through trauma to leave if they want to. You are guaranteeing that trauma by doing that, by making an 8-year-old recite a creed about things that he can't possibly understand, hasn't possibly thought about, doesn't know anything about. You are guaranteeing trauma for that child. So it could accurately be said that you are traumatizing that child. And maybe not at the moment, but since you're guaranteeing it down the road, in other words, it shouldn't happen. No matter how treasured a part of your culture it is, it shouldn't happen. And the reason that it does is several religious orders in the course of the last few centuries have been quite open about why that's so important, is because that's when it will work and not otherwise. If you don't raise your children religiously to any denomination whatsoever, to any belief, to any creed of any kind, and then in adulthood you ask them, okay, well, now that you've reached 21, the age of 21, we want you to decide which of these invisible beings for which there is no proof whatsoever, you want you to decide now that you're 21, you're going to be able to drink legally in the United States, you're going to be able to drive a car and vote and get drafted into the army. And also, we now want you to pick which interdimensional, intangible, invisible being you must bend the knee to for the rest of your life. Religious organizations, especially tightly knit ones like the Jesuits, know perfectly well that no one would make that decision. No 21-year-old raised without religion would make that decision. In fact, the tiny, tiny, statistically negligible handful of people who do make that decision would be worth watching for psychological reasons. They would obviously be showing some sort of defect. And every religious indoctrination organization knows that. That's why they target children. That's why they make sure to say, come unto me, suffer the little children to come unto me. That's why they make sure to do it. And I might agree with the Daniel Dennett, the famous one of the members of the Four Horsemen, has advocated for years that instead of indoctrinating children into your religion, into the religion that you were indoctrinated into, instead of doing that, let's have children learn about religion in school. Not one religion, all religions. Let's have them learn about it. Not just the deities and the rules and the restrictions, but also how it's been promulgated throughout history. Let's teach them about the history of Christianity, the history of Islam, the history of Buddhism. And When he makes that suggestion in front of religious crowds, they seethe with anger. Seethe with it. And that's because they know that the very deepest root of their plant is being hacked at. They know how vulnerable it is to an approach like that. They shouldn't. It shouldn't be, right? Speaking just for Christianity here, Christians believe that God calls to them. Well, okay, if you believe that, then why do you need to indoctrinate your children? He will call to them. They will all have their road to Damascus moment. Unless you're worried they won't. And suddenly all those mega churches all throughout the American Bible Belt will be empty. So we'll have to see. These authors they're scholars and they're experts. So I get to read this thing right away. It's not a 2020 release, so I can just dig right in. I have a feeling that I might argue with it, but at least they're safe from being on my worst nonfiction of the year list. That's already done. All right. So that's pretty contentious. Indoctrinating children into religion. That's pretty serious. So let's see what this last one is. The bean is finished with her treat. So, S-Dawn Editions, thank you very much, but it was a transitory thing. It didn't last her very long. And that chewable treats never do. Let's see what this next one is. Oh, okay, great. All right, this is a finished copy of something we've seen before. There he is in all his glory. Okay. This is a work of history. So these are 4 works of nonfiction, 3 works of history. We saw this already. This is from Oxford University Press. Looks like somebody cleared out a desk at Oxford before they went on vacation. This is by Gene Baker, and it's called Building America, The Life of Benjamin Henry Latrobe. Those are some of the things that he masterminded. He was an architect who is, baby, you just had a treat. Don't eat cardboard. Let's see here. We talked about this, but it was a while ago. So, architecture is all around us, often unseen and unremarked upon. Certain buildings, however, convey something beyond utilitarian shelter. They convey something of the human ideas housed within their walls, some notion of the noble purposes for which they were constructed. The White House, wide and welcoming like a formal country estate. Remember I mentioned when we saw this the first time that the White House is an armed camp, surrounded on all sides by howitzers and missile launchers and armed men of all kinds. The U.S. Capitol building with its Roman dome and pillars. Likewise, you can't walk into the U.S. Capitol building anymore. You used to be able to, and you absolutely should be able to if you're an American citizen. You absolutely should be able to, but you can't. These buildings allude to the history of Republican thought from Rome through the Enlightenment and to the Founding Fathers. And in this book, historian Gene Baker documents the life of America's first professional architect who put his stamp on the built landscape of the new republic. Benjamin Latrobe created or contributed to some of the early republic's most iconic structures, including the south wing of the Capitol building, the White House, the Navy Yard, Statuary Hall, and the Senate, House, and Supreme Court chambers. Like his patron Thomas Jefferson, Latrobe saw his neoclassical designs as a way to convey American democracy. He envisioned his engineering projects, such as the canals and municipal water system for Philadelphia and New Orleans, as a way to unite the nation and improve public health. And this is the first biography of this nerd in a long time, probably 50 years, maybe more than that, at least from a popular press. And Gene Baker is the Bennett Harwood Professor of History Emerita at Goucher College. An eminent political historian and biography, she is the author of a biography of Margaret Sanger, collected biography of America's first suffragettes, a biography of James Buchanan, and infamously, I think we saw it on this channel, a biography of Mary Todd Lincoln that tries, as did the 2 volumes that we saw in 2019, to revive the image of Mary Todd Lincoln. We saw 2 volumes that did that about George Washington's mother. Some things even the most industrious biographers simply cannot do. And this author's Mary Todd Lincoln, I think, is the only book I read by her, and it didn't work at all. It didn't work at all. Mary Todd Lincoln was still had bats in her belfry. But this is fascinating. I don't actually know, when it comes to Latrobe, I don't actually know what would constitute. It's a fairly small thing. I don't actually know him well enough to know what would constitute a really conscientiously done book. I have no idea where his documents are. It's not like for instance, the other day I found a 2-volume biography of Baltasar Castiglione, the author of The Courtier. 2-volume biography by Julia Cartwright. And when it comes to Castiglione, I know where the document collections are. I've seen and held in my hand some of his letters in one of those collections, and I know where the others are. I know, in other words, with a book like that, I know what the author needs to tell me they did. I know what familiarities they need to demonstrate to me in order to know before I read a single word whether or not it's worth the while to do. But I don't know enough about Latrobe to know one way or another. I have to assume that the author with her credentials is doing a really good job. But where's the rest of the book? Maybe his life wasn't that interesting outside of architecture. Okay, well, anyway, this comes out on January 3rd. So these are works of history and nonfiction that come out right at the beginning of the year. Great. Okay, so there you go. That is your Christmas Day mail haul. So we can do mail hauls on Christmas Day, then we can do them anytime. So this is Gene Baker, Building America, a biography of Benjamin Henry Latrobe, whose works you know by sight, even if you've never heard of him. Then Religious Parenting, a book about the role that parents play in transmitting religion to their children. I don't know quite who else the authors would think would have a prominent role in doing that. I wouldn't want the state to do it, and maybe they mean the churches themselves or the synagogues. Or and then we have Information Hunters, a book about heroic librarians during World War II. We have Democracy and Equality, which sounds like it's going to be a favorable estimation of the Warren Court's legacy. You could easily do, and I have read, books by authors who did the exact opposite, who tore down, attacked the ramifications of some of those choices. Some of them you can't attack, at least prior to 2016 you can't. Nowadays there's no limit to what you can do in public. Now I imagine somebody could get a publishing deal to publish a book criticizing Brown v. Board of Education. I bet somebody could do that. I bet they wouldn't have to fight hard to find a reputable publisher somewhere in the mainstream of American publishing that would publish that book. Because we have Hollywood stars making quick YouTube videos in which they pretty openly confess to hiring someone to kill a witness against them in a trial. This seems to be the way of it. The president goes on the South Lawn of the White House and says, I think that China and Ukraine should start massive investigations of my political opponents. That is totally unconstitutional. That is totally illegal. That is bribery, and it's being done in front of cameras. The guy's acting chief of staff gets in front of a room full of reporters and says, yeah, we trade congressionally mandated aid and comfort to our allies and friends for political favors all the time. Get over it. So maybe the day is coming when someone will take a full frontal attack on some of the more treasured legacies of the Warren Court. Maybe we will see that day. And then the last book, in many ways the most interesting one, Malcolm McPhail's Great War by Darrell Duthie. I really recommend this series. There are now 2 other books in this series, and I really recommend them. They're World War I era murder mysteries that are different from most World War I era murder mysteries. Rennie Arth might be one that you would know, an author you would know who does that, in that a great deal of the books take place near or at the action of the front. You wouldn't think that would be conducive to a murder mystery, but the author does a great job. This author and this whole series is no offense to Esdorn Publishing, but this whole thing is waiting to be snapped up by somebody who can give it 10 times the distribution. But in the meantime, just remember the author's name, Darrell Duthie, and go and find some of the books. Maybe request them for your library or from your bookstore. But one way or another, that's it. That is our Christmas Day mail haul. And what would Christmas be without a little Christmas angel? Oh. There's a little Christmas angel. Oh. There you go. Right, Bean? There they are. Oh. Everybody likes you. They do. I like you too. I think you're the sweetest thing. All right, so Merry Christmas to all of you, and we will be back. Thank you, BookTube.